Oh, I can't believe it finally showed up. I sacrificed both of my hands for these smaller hands in order to summon the ultimate clamshell handheld. Sure, using it's probably gonna be extremely inconvenient now with these tiny hands, but I'm in too deep at this point. So let's finally see the Retroid Pocket Flip. Oh, come on! That's right, folks, we have the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, the latest clamshell handheld from Retroid, makers of one of the best retro handhelds of all time, the Retroid Pocket 5. The Pocket Flip 2 has the exact same internals as the Pocket 5. Same processor, same battery, same everything. But this time, it can flip. And that changes everything. This clamshell form factor and reimagined control layout make this an excellent option to bring anywhere and game everywhere. And with its 5.5-inch AMOLED display, games are gonna look excellent with rich colors and vibrant contrast. There are a ton of great things about this device, but just as many things that could be better. So in this video, we're gonna take a look at the Retroid Pocket Flip 2, see how it feels, play some different games on it, and talk about what you can expect with this clamshell handheld. We're gonna explore every aspect of the Flip 2, so you can really decide if this is the right handheld for you. Now we all know that inside of every clam could be a pearl. So is the Retroid Pocket Flip 2 the pearl that we've been looking for? Let's find out. So here's the box that the Retroid Pocket Flip 2 comes in. We have the colors on the left side with 4 color options, including black, 16-bit US, Gamecube, and ice blue model. And you can see below that there's an SD865 and D1100. Those are the internal chipsets. The D1100 model is not available yet, and I highly recommend that nobody get that. It is not worth saving the extra $30 to sacrifice on all that performance. The Snapdragon 865 version is the way to go for 99% of people. Now let's see what's going on inside the box. Whew! I thought it'd be a creeper DS again. Thankfully, it's just the regular Retroid. Oh, come on! Okay, that's much better. Anyways, here we have a quality assurance accepted. So we got a QC passing. And underneath that is the console. And here is the Retroid Pocket Flip 2. Off the bat, we can see this weird clock design. I'm not sure what they were kind of doing with this. It has a very fine spirally texture on the pie part. On the rest of the body, this transparent ice blue model has a very slightly textured plastic finish. I wouldn't call it the most premium feeling, but it's definitely a step above other handhelds at lower price points. Let's take a look at the external features of the Retroid Pocket Flip 2. The biggest feature of this handheld is its clamshell design, with 2 hinge points. The first at 150 degrees and the second at 178 degrees. When it's closed, we have this crosshairs with a clock-shaped design, possibly alluding to the hinge movement. On the bottom, we have 1 micro SD card slot, a USB-C port for data and 27-watt fast charging, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. On the top of the device, we have clicky shoulder bumpers and analog triggers, and in the center is the fan exhaust. On the right side, we have a clicky volume rocker. Nothing on the left side outside of a very sneaky lanyard hole at the bottom left. On the back, we have the fan intake, a Retroid Pocket logo at the bottom, and some slightly indented grooves. On top is a beautiful 5.5-inch 1080p AMOLED display at 500 nits brightness. This is the same panel that's on the Retroid Pocket 5. And on the bottom, there's 2 front-firing stereo speakers. On the front, we have ABXY buttons in the Nintendo layout with A on the right, X on the top. A D-pad with dome-style switches, so it's clicky and tactile. On top, there's 2 inline hall sensor analog sticks with RGB rings behind them. Start and select buttons on the outsides, a home back combo button, click once for back, hold for home, and a power button for sleep, turning off and on, and rebooting. The device also automatically sleeps when you close the hinge. Now let's take a look at the hinge. Whoa, that's good. This is a great hinge, almost great. I've only had it for 10 days and it's starting to sound a little rough, a little squeaky in the knees, but we'll come back to that later. It's an extremely smooth movement here, and it has that extra click out at the end to go to 180 degrees. The default angle here is 150 degrees, or about 60 degrees past the right angle. It has a little bit of resistance when you open it, and then it just flings open. Once you open it up, you'll realize that the placement of everything is very spread out. In my opinion, a little too spread out, to the point that it feels like too much travel to switch between the analog sticks and the face buttons. It's just very bizarre, especially while you're trying to hold this clamshell device. It might feel like a normal distance on handheld controllers, but when you're trying to hold a clamshell and use these triggers that are all the way up top, it's just a very strange shape. Now, the ergonomics of this handheld are very hotly contended for some reason, and there's been a lot of ergonomic experts cropping up and saying that you're just holding the device wrong. Hold it differently. You need to hold it from the sides. Well, listen, I don't think it's that simple. Everybody's hands are different, and everybody's going to be playing different games, like twin analog stick shooters or D-pad platformers. I just wanted to clarify all of this because there's going to be some people who say, look at this big dummy holding it wrong. You're not holding the device properly. I just think it's an ergonomic flaw if people have to tell you how to hold your device. You know what I'm saying? I feel like this is a device that's kind of designed for larger hands, given how spread out everything is and how much there is to hold onto. It's both big and small because you can see that when it closes down, it's pretty compact. And then when you open it up, you realize that the controls are very spread out. If they were to have curved the edges, it'd probably be a little more comfortable, but I do understand the limitations of the board that they have underneath. The outer edges of the Flip 2 are also very angular and pretty sharp. If you hold it with a closer grip, you'll feel that edge digging into your palm a little bit. It all depends on your hand shape and how you hold the device, but keep in mind, the Flip 2's ergonomics are just completely different compared to any other retro handheld. I'd even say it's completely different compared to a DSi XL or 3DS XL too. So with this transparent blue model, you can see all of the guts inside, including this ribbon cable there. You can see the entire board. They can't hide anything. So if you like the way that this looks, this frosted blue-greenish hue with the entire board and speakers on display, then you'd be interested in this blue model. But if this isn't appealing to you, then there are 3 other color options that you can get. So you're probably wondering, what's the size of the Flip 2? Well, Retroid spec sheet says that it's 140.5 millimeters wide, 89.5 millimeters from base to hinge, and 24.4 millimeters thick. Now let's convert that to inches. The Flip 2 is about 5.5 inches wide, exactly 6.5 inches tall, and just under an inch thick when it's open. Now when it's closed, it's just under 3.5 inches tall and about an inch and a quarter thick. The Flip 2 weighs just over 308 grams, and that's about 2/3 of a pound. Now let's see how the size of the Flip 2 stacks up to some other devices that you might be more familiar with. Here we have the Retroid Pocket 5, which has the same 5.5-inch OLED screen, but the Flip 2 has the clamshell buff. So it's about 2/3 the length and about 2.5 times taller when it's flipped out. And here's how they look when the Flip 2 is open. And here we have a, oh, no. Okay, here we have a Minecraft 2DS LL. That's a double large, it's just a 2DS XL in Japan. They're both the exact same height, about the same when they're open too. But thickness is no competition. The Flip 2 is significantly thicker than the 2DS XL. Here we have an original Ambassador Edition 3DS. The Flip 2 is only a couple millimeters longer than the 3DS. Here's how they look flipped open. The Flip 2 is about 1.5 times as thick as the 3DS. This is how they look at the first hinge point and the furthest hinge point. A trim UI brick is exactly half as wide and about 25% taller when the Flip 2 is closed, but when it's open, the Flip 2 is much taller than the brick. Here's how the Flip 2 compares to an Anbernic 35XX SP. The SP feels like the Flip 2 just chopped in half. And here's how the thickness and hinge angles compare. Here's how it compares to an Xbox Series controller. And here's how it looks when the Flip 2 is open. Here's how the Flip 2 compares to an iPhone 13 Pro, a little over half the height when it's closed, and when it's open, it's a little taller than the iPhone. Here's how it would look in your pocket, but this would definitely give you that George Costanza wallet pocket bulge. And here's how it looks when the Flip 2 is flipped. Speaking of pockets, here's a pair of AirPod Pro 2s. And as customary, here's the Steam Deck LCD model. Here is it in Stackovision. Now let's shift gears and take a look at the controls. We have two 3D Hall Effect analog sticks with RGB behind them, and these sticks feel amazing. I don't know what kind of sauce Retroid threw in here, but they feel like a huge step up from the Retroid Pocket 5, and they have a wide range of motion. And around the edge, they have this textured rim to keep your thumb from sliding off. The sticks are mostly flat with a slight convex shape to them, so they bump up a little bit at the top. This paired with the textured outer edge is a great combination that's perfect for stick-centric gaming. The RGB rings around the analog sticks are also fully configurable and have a wide range of color options. And there's this app on the Play Store called Ambuluna that dynamically changes the color of the RGB rings based on what's on screen. It's not fully real time, but it's close enough, and it has a very cool ambient glow effect. Moving down to these face buttons, they feel so good on the thumbs. They have a bit of a rounded edge to them, and they sit pretty low on the device, and they press in all the way too. They feel very solid. They're not too mushy and they're not too firm. They're not the quietest buttons, but they're not super loud either. I'd put them a notch above medium volume. The D-pad is quite interesting. It's a classic Retroid dome switch style D-pad, so it's very clicky, but not loud clicky. It's just very satisfying and has quite crisp inputs. Just like the face buttons, the D-pad sits pretty low on the device, and it has a decent amount of give to it. The plastic of the D-pad is pretty firm, and the conformations of presses are pretty satisfying. This is a great D-pad for platformers and fighting games alike. On the back here, we have stacked shoulder buttons with L1 and R1 bumpers and L2 and R2 triggers. These bumpers are quite loud and clicky. I'm personally a fan of quiet controls across the board, so having these very clicky bumpers is not exactly the best. I could hear these from like a mile away, god damn. What's not clicky is the L2 and R2 triggers, because they're analog, so they have a great range of motion. There's not much resistance to it at all, so if you're into this hairstyle trigger, where it doesn't take much resistance to press it down, then these will be for you. These really take very minimal resistance to press down. From a shape standpoint, you can see that the L1 and R1 bumpers have this edge to them where they pop out along the corner, but the L2 and R2 do not at all. They don't have any sort of outward curve. They're very much entirely facing away from you. These back triggers have a very unnatural shape to them. Every other trigger, including Retroid's own triggers, have a natural slope along the side and a nice curve in the middle. The Flip 2 has neither of those. That fall off is extremely steep, and it just goes from flat to flared up. They just don't feel very natural, especially if you're used to other controllers. These are just too tall and weird shaped. Now in the upper middle, we have 4 buttons. We got start and select on the outsides and home and power on the insides. It's kind of a confusing place for power. I wish that that was just a back button instead of the power, and it would have been great to just have power at the bottom or somewhere where you wouldn't accidentally press it. But I guess they just slapped it in the middle. Moving on to internal features, we have a Snapdragon 865 chipset. There's also a lower powered Dimensity D1100 model, but I recommend everybody go with the Snapdragon model for significantly better performance. The GPU is an Adreno 650, which gives us excellent custom driver support. For RAM, we have 8 GB of LPDDR4X RAM clocked at 2133 MHz. For storage, we have 128 GB of UFS 3.1 built in and 1 microSD card slot. It has a 5000 milliamp hour battery with support for 27 watt fast charging. This gives us 3.5 hours of high-end gameplay like Switch and Windows emulation, and over 10 hours of low-end gaming like Game Boy Advance and Super Nintendo. For connectivity, we have Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.1. This is excellent for game streaming, and it comes with Android 13 out of the box. The Snapdragon model also supports Linux, so you can install Rocknix for Xbox and PS3 emulation. Results may vary. Now let's do a quick and extremely rigorous power on time test to see how long the Flip 2 takes to turn on. So it takes around 15 to 16 seconds to turn this thing on. That's pretty solid. That being said, it's also a clamshell. So when you close it, then it goes into automatic sleep mode. And then you open it back up, and within under a second, it's right back in. Look at this vibrant, giant 5.5-inch AMOLED panel here. This is the same one that they use on the Retroid Pocket 5. It looks amazing with these very small bezels on the side. It's just extremely immersive. These flip style devices like DSs and 3DSs are extremely immersive because they separate the controls on the bottom and the screen on the top. So I've spent the last 20 minutes configuring some different settings on here and getting a front end in the mix. This is ESDE. You can get it from their Patreon for a couple bucks. And we have the iconic theme, which kind of adds a little bit of flavor to the whole front end experience, kind of consoleizes everything. Now the default operating system is Android 13, so you get a very typical Android experience. But we also get an entire suite of over 20 different emulators, some free and some paid, but you don't have to pay for them because don't worry, Retroid bootlegged it for you. I'm not a big fan of Retroid stealing from these smaller indie developers. Please support those developers if you can afford to. Now with all of the pre-installed bootlegged apps, some of them are gonna be pretty outdated and you might not get the best performance because of that. So I'd recommend instead just installing your own emulators. And there's a great free app called Obtainium that makes this process super easy and very user-friendly. So you can streamline installing all your favorite emulators and keeping them up to date. Now because this is a clamshell handheld, we have the huge benefit of being able to just close it when we're done. So if you're on the go and you just want to close it and then open it back up, then it automatically sleeps and wakes with the closing of the hinge. This also works in games too, so you don't need to quit out of your game in order to put into sleep mode. That being said, on certain consoles like Switch, if you do put it into sleep mode while the app is running, then it could drain your battery significantly faster. I'd recommend saving and closing your game before putting it into sleep mode in order to get the most battery efficiency out of this sleep mode. Now that we've looked at all the specs and features on this little guy, let's get into some gameplay to see how games look, play, and feel on the Retroid Pocket Flip 2. Now the Flip 2 has the exact same internals as the Pocket 5, so performance will be identical, but we're gonna test a few more consoles to really look at how the device feels and controls across different games. Now, since this is a pretty powerful chipset, let's start off with Nintendo Switch. Now, something happened with my camera that blurred the first game here. It's very tragic, but I hope you stick through it. Zeldo Crazy Breath was one of my favorite games to play on the Flip 2. The visuals look absolutely gorgeous, and the game performs quite well on here too. We're getting 25 to 30 FPS on average, running it at 0.75x resolution. Sure, it's not a locked 30 FPS, but overall it was very playable, and more importantly, very enjoyable. Now the face buttons, D-pad, and especially the analog sticks all felt excellent. Moving over into Dark Souls, this also performed quite well after I applied the lighting fix mod. We're running it at standard 720p resolution and getting pretty much 30 FPS locked outside of bosses. I got my ass handed to me by the first boss, but that's just the Dark Souls experience. Here's Celeste running at 720p, 60 FPS. The D-pad was tactile and responsive. The face buttons were good too, but I found the controls to be pretty uncomfortable with the distance between the D-pad and the shoulder buttons and triggers, but that's just the nature of these devices. They're comfortable for some people and less comfortable for others. Next up is Skyrim. You know we had to do it to them. You know I had to get me some Skyrim in the mix. That's just my thing. I'm the Skyrim guy. Now I have a love-hate relationship with emulating emulating the Switch version of this game. It's almost perfect, running at 30 FPS, pretty much locked. The game looks amazing on the OLED, and having it in a clamshell form factor just feels so good. So you're probably wondering, why do I hate it? Well, because it crashes, and not frequently enough to where it feels unplayable either. It lures you in to a false sense of security, and then it crashes on you when you forget to save for 15 minutes. And outside of the crashing, there's an occasional light flicker in some dungeons. During those parts, I usually turn the brightness all the way down and then sort of power through it. But these occasional inconveniences are massively outweighed by the breadth of this game and how great of an RPG it is on a clamshell like this. Now, moving up the performance ladder even more, we have Winlator. This is Windows emulation, and we got Fallout New Vegas running. You're looking at 50 to 60 FPS on average, including fights. This runs insanely good. I was actually shocked at the performance we were getting. I'm running this in Winlator Winebox 64. I would definitely consider this a bonus system that needs some tweaking to get right, so don't expect this to work perfectly out of the box. So if you're interested in playing this, I actually made a tutorial on how to install Fallout New Vegas on the Retroid Pocket 5, and that's the same process for the Flip too. But I've actually found that a fork of Winlator called Winlator Winebox 64, or WB64, gives us this level of performance. It's just a whole other league compared to other Winlator forks from the ones that I've tested, including Winlator Bionic. Jumping back in time here, we have Wind Waker for the Gamecube, but a little bit specced out version. We're running this with widescreen hacks, an HD texture pack, and at 3x resolution, so it's 1080p. This is my favorite way to play Wind Waker. I know that there's the Wii U version, but Wii U emulation just isn't quite there yet, so this is more than enough. I mean, look at how good it looks, especially on this OLED screen. I just can't stop geeking about this screen. The experience was extremely immersive, and I just love how games feel on this fully separated screen. There's just something that's magical about a flip style device like this. The controls needed some sensitivity and inversion adjustment, especially on the right stick, but the gameplay felt and looked amazing. Now, since capturing this footage, I actually found out about something called Better Wind Waker. It's a patch for the Wind Waker ROM, and it adds widescreen, fast sailing, skip text, and tons of other improvements. So I'd actually recommend just patching your Wind Waker ROM with that, instead of going through all the emulator rigmarole. Here we have Mario Kart Double Dash running with widescreen hacks and 1080p resolution. Menus look a little wonky with the widescreen hacks, but the actual gameplay looks amazing. Performance was pretty much perfect, 60 FPS locked. This is a very smooth and optimized game. This one actually felt great with the analog sticks. I love these thumbsticks that they used on the Flip too, and it was actually quite comfortable overall. And of course, we had to throw some Tony Hawk in the mix. We got Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4 running at 1080p resolution. It played 99% perfectly with a very occasional dip. If you're sensitive to that, I'd stick to 2x resolution. If you don't mind 720p. This game also has native widescreen support, so we didn't even have to use any widescreen hacks. I did have to change the video renderer to OpenGL because Vulkan had some weird stutters, so just make sure to do that in the Dolphin game settings and it'll run very smoothly. Speaking of smooth, the controls felt excellent. I had to remap the Gamecube controls to my personal muscle memory. Once I did that, I was in the flow state. Up next is PlayStation 2 and the Nether SX2 emulator. Here we have Shadow of the Colossus running at 2x resolution with the OpenGL backend. It has native widescreen support, so it just looks and feels so massive in this flip style device. Now we're running this at 720p with the OpenGL backend, and we're still getting some occasional frame dips, but this is a pretty demanding game, so that's to be expected. And luckily, the frame dips don't really happen when you're taking down a Colossus. They're so rare that they don't hinder the overall experience. And of course, you know we had to do it to him. Simpsons Hit and Run, 2x resolution at 720p. This ran very well, hovering around 60 FPS, but dipping down when there is a lot of coins on screen. It had good frame pacing though, so those frame dips didn't feel too disruptive to the overall immersion. Any game that's colorful like this really pops on the screen. Now, since this is a DS style device, you would think that this would be an excellent 3DS emulator, right? Now, if you really look closely, you'll see that we only have one screen on here. If it had two screens, this would be insanely good, but with one screen, you kind of got to tuck the lower screen down in the corner and then swap when needed. Luckily, you can actually bind swap screen to the L3 button, so you can just click on the analog stick and switch your screens. And I like to bind quick save to the right thumbstick click, R3. With Metroid Samus Returns here, we're running this at 3x resolution or 720p, and it's running perfectly. Scaling it up to 4x resolution gets a little framey for a fast-paced game like this, so I keep it at 720p, and it looks great and plays great. Going back a generation, here we have the regular DS, Castlevania Dawn of Sorrow. Now I kinda defaulted to using the analog stick because it felt more comfortable than using the D-pad, but the D-pad was very crisp and it still felt great. The face buttons were tight and responsive, but the shoulder bumpers felt a little small when playing. Here's Pokemon Sacred Gold, which is a Heart Gold ROM hack. Pokemon DS is just not great because you have to read your moves on the bottom screen and see your health on the top screen, so you have to shrink both screens to a readable size. It never quite feels right, and it's just a compromised experience. This is probably not the best way to play Pokemon DS games. There might be a better option out there. DSi XL. And your classic systems like Game Boy Advance are gonna look and play great on here. I still feel like the D-pad and shoulder buttons are a little far away from each other, but again, this is a personal preference, and you know, my hands are just a little bit on the weird side, I guess. And finally, Pokemon Unbound looks fucking amazing. This handheld feels like it's built for Pokemon Game Boy Advance games. The flip style design means you can just pause the game and put it to sleep, come back later, play for 10-15 minutes. It's so pick up and play with a game that's also pick up and play. It's just so good on this 5.5-inch display. It's crisp, it scales very well, and I would love to play some more Pokemon Game Boy Advance games on here. As we saw, performance on the Flip 2 is amazing. There's no other way to put it. This is a beast when it comes to retro emulation and even some higher end, more modern systems like Windows and Switch. Gamecube and PS2 played great at 2 to 3 times resolution, and we threw some HD texture packs in with the Gamecube games. And we really pushed the limits with that Switch and Windows emulation, getting Fallout New Vegas to run between 40 to 60 FPS on average. And we can't forget about Zeldo Crazy Breath running between 25 and 30 FPS. The display on the Flip 2 is absolutely gorgeous, and it looks even better and bigger now that it's not sandwiched between controls like the Retroid Pocket 5. This 5.5-inch AMOLED screen is so rich and colorful and detailed at 1080p that it really feels like the perfect immersive experience. The Steam Deck has an 800p display at 7.4 inches with also enormous bezels. So a 1080p 5.5-inch panel looks very crisp and detailed in games. Now with this chipset, you can do plenty of upscaling and enhancements across different systems. You can also add shaders to retro consoles to give them a new feel. We also have a touchscreen display, so navigating any prompts on 3DS and DS games is super easy and convenient. But speaking of DS, the biggest downside of a clamshell like this is not having 2 screens. We only have one screen because this is a classic Android clamshell. A wise old man once said, "The best 3DS emulator is a 3DS." Wait, no, he said 2DS. But I actually found that on the Flip 2, single screen 3DS games felt great. Metroid Samus Returns looks awesome, and you can map the swap screen and save state to L3 and R3 to get the best experience out of it too. Now looking at the size of this, it feels bigger than it is. And a big part of that is how chonky this thing is. It's got this very thick kind of chode build to it. It almost feels like 2 3DSs stacked into one, especially when it's open too. Just coming from DSs and 3DSs, this thing does not feel like those at all. This thing is at 2DS XL with a BBL, you know what I'm saying? Speaking of size and ergonomics, I'm pretty disappointed with the overall comfort of the Flip 2. This thing has the ergonomics of a Minecraft slab. It's pretty angular. It also has this sharp ridge halfway along the side, so the device is not as smooth along the outer border. You'd think looking at this that it has similar ergonomics to a DS, but the problem is that it's so much taller that it just changes the way that you hold it and control it in general too. It's completely different. It doesn't evoke any sort of DS or 3DS feel. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about the comfort of the Flip 2. Is it ergonomic? Is it not ergonomic? Can only people with large hands use this device, or smaller hands too, but only a specific size? So to put all the allegations to rest, we're gonna do a hand check using my trusty ruler. Now, I have medium large hands. This is my full wingspan here. I'm clocking in at 9 inches, pinky to thumb, with a full spread. Now, I don't know how we do this, but if you wanted to know that, that's how long that is. And for the most important test of all, hand turkey. Moving over to the build quality, the plastic on this transparent ice blue model here doesn't feel too cheap, and the design on the front isn't super appalling too. I know this is quite a divisive design here, but I think that on the transparent blue model, it kind of just all blends together. You know, it's not too outlandish. It might be worse on the solid models because it's more noticeable, but on the transparent blue model, it's fine, and it adds a little pizzazz, I guess. To be honest, I'm usually interested in weird designs, but this one is kind of just confusing, so I don't really have much of an opinion on it. So I've been using the Flip 2 for about a week and a half now, opening it maybe 5, 10, 15 times a day. Nothing crazy, I'm not like fidgeting with it, but I've noticed that the hinge is starting to squeak a little bit. Not a great sign, right? Here's how it sounds. Now, it's not the worst squeaking in the world, but again, I've had this for only 10 days. Who's to say what 30 days will feel like? If the hinge doesn't work, the device doesn't work. It really hinges on the hinge. So this hinge is definitely something we'll check back in 6 months and see how it's holding up. Now let's talk about the speakers on the Flip 2. They're extremely loud. I was actually very surprised at how much output this thing can generate. They're not the best quality speakers, and they seem to have what sounds like a bit of a noise gate compression problem, where lower volumes tend to kind of cut in and out a little bit. But that's not the biggest problem, and it might just be a software issue that can be fixed later. But let's do a sound test to compare the speakers on the Flip 2 to a very similar device, the Retroid Pocket 5. Now, when it comes to game streaming like Moonlight, Artemis Apollo, or GeForce Now, any of those streaming apps, it's very fast as long as your internet's fast. This shouldn't really be too much of a bottleneck. And the device stays very cool when you're streaming because it doesn't take that much processing. And the analog sticks feel excellent because this is a stick-centric device. It really just feels like a top-notch streaming handheld. The 5.5-inch OLED display really brings those games to life, and As long as you're not playing games with very tiny text, you'll have a great time streaming on this one. Now the operating system is Android, so it'll inevitably need some tweaking. Luckily, because it's also Android, there's so many amazing apps and up-to-date emulators and Play Store games too. I've even used a handful of new emulators that I haven't used before, like Azahar, Citron, even Winlator Winebox 64, which gave us amazing performance in Fallout New Vegas. All of this was possible because of Android. So this is a great device if you like being able to play a ton of mid-range consoles like Gamecube, Wii, PS2, and even some Switch, Wii U, and Windows. Now I want to talk about something that I don't hear people mentioning enough, and it's the heat of the Flip 2. This thing gets extremely hot in the center here and on the back, specifically when you're playing higher end consoles like Switch and Windows emulation. But we're not just gonna talk about the heat, we're gonna measure it. Quick disclaimer, do not try this at home, folks. I'm not a professional and this was a stupid and dangerous idea, which is exactly why I did it. Our method of testing is 3 average situations: running performance mode with the smart fan on, running performance mode with quiet fan on, and standard mode with no fan on. In all 3 scenarios, we're running high-end 3D Switch emulation for 15 minutes. In between each test, I let it cool down, and then I ran the next one. This was not a fully controlled environment. I just wanted to test average, normal user scenarios. Here's what happened. Starting in performance mode with smart fan enabled, the hotspot on the front was along the start, select, home back, and power buttons. And this area got up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, or around 50 degrees Celsius. Pretty spicy, even with smart fan enabled. The controller area on the left and right sides was between 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and the back was a very cool 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Taking it a step down, here's quiet fan mode, and now the hot spot is getting over 130 degrees Fahrenheit, which is above 55 degrees Celsius. The controller area now creeps up to 95 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and along the back, we're still at a very cool 88 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, standard mode with no fan on, just passive cooling. The hotspot on the front got up to a scorching 151 degrees Fahrenheit, over 65 degrees Celsius. This could lead to burns after just 5 seconds of contact. So that hotspot is officially hazardous. And I tested it twice to make sure this thermometer wasn't broken. The controller area is a toasty 110 to 125 degrees Fahrenheit, and the back is now at 122 degrees Fahrenheit, or 50 degrees Celsius. I didn't expect the Flip 2 to reach over 150 degrees Fahrenheit in just 15 minutes of gaming without the fan on. I've used the Retroid Pocket 5 for almost 6 months now, and it's never felt this extremely hot. So for the final experiment, I ran the same test on the Retroid Pocket 5, just the no fan standard mode scenario. After 15 minutes of Switch gaming, the front reached 118 degrees Fahrenheit, the controller area was between 90 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and the back was a toasty 122 degrees Fahrenheit, or 50 degrees Celsius. So our final verdict is the Flip 2 gets extremely hot. If you're running high-end emulation without the fan on, it's over 30 degrees Fahrenheit hotter than the Retroid Pocket 5. The Pocket 5 has the benefit of the all-glass surface, which helps to dissipate the heat and spread it more evenly, leading to a safer operating temperature. Meanwhile, the Flip 2 is extremely congested in that start select system button area, leading to a pretty dangerous temperature. Even in the smart fan mode, the surface still gets very, very hot. The biggest difference here is the Flip 2 has this compact all plastic shell, so it can't dissipate the heat anywhere and it all just goes right to your fingers. So obviously, don't grab your pitchforks and hunt down Retroid. This is just a design problem and something to be aware of if you're looking to pick up the Flip 2. If you do plan on running high-end emulation, you should keep that fan on at least quiet mode, but I'd recommend turning it to smart fan mode. Now the quiet fan mode is quite loud, to be honest, and it kind of has a bit of a coil whine to it. And I've heard that other people are experiencing this too. I'm hoping that Retroid can tweak the fan curves and then put out an OTA update that solves this problem. Hey folks, happy to report they released an update that lowered that fan curve. So the quiet fan is now quieter. I'd say about 20%, that's just my estimate. So keep that in mind for this next section, that the quiet fan is about 20% quieter than this footage here. It's still not that quiet, and my opinion is still that it's too loud. Now that we've covered all of my nitpicks so far, I want to flip it and talk about the overall quality of this handheld. As a whole, the quality of this device feels excellent for an upper mid-range retro handheld. This screen punches well above its weight class, and the Snapdragon processor underneath is a perfect pairing. The D-pad and face buttons feel solid, and the analog sticks are smooth and satisfying. Some of the design choices have me scratching my head, but the quality here is undeniable. This is a very premium Android gaming experience. Now that we've covered pretty much everything you need to know about the Flip 2, let's sum everything up with a pros, mids, and cons list. For pros, the biggest feature of the Flip 2 is the clamshell design. It makes it super portable, and it gives it an advantage above pretty much any non-clamshell device. Also, this is the best screen you can get on a handheld under $250. The performance is excellent, and the Snapdragon chipset gives us great emulator compatibility. The D-pad and ABXY buttons are also very good. They're tactile, precise, and not too clackety. Those Hall effect analog sticks are very premium feeling. And finally, we can run Android and Linux on here. The Flip 2 supports a Linux distro called Rocknix, which allows us to run Xbox and PS3 emulation, albeit with varying results. Let's move over to the mids category, which could swing either way depending on your personal preference. At the top of the list is the size. The Flip 2 is what I call big small. It's big for a small device, or vice versa, but when you open it up, it just feels massive in a good way. I was expecting it to feel like a 3DS XL, but it just doesn't feel like that at all. Then there's the L1 and R1 bumpers. They're a little thin, they flare out on the sides, and they're pretty clicky. And speaking of those bumpers, let's talk about the controls layout. All of the face controls have kind of a V shape to them, where the D-pad and face buttons are more inset. The analog sticks are on top, which is opposite of the Pocket 5. And finally, there's the hinge. Oh, I got a love-hate relationship with this one. It feels great at first, then it became squeaky and a little rough as I'd open it. It's not terrible, and even a rougher Retroid hinge is 10 times better than a Miu hinge. And finally, for cons, at the top of the list, it's gotta be the heat. This thing gets scorching hot, hazardously hot, dangerously hot. So you really need to leave the fan on if you're doing any medium and high-end emulation. Next is its boxy shape. I've found that it's chonky, square, and angular, and to my hands, just not very ergonomic. The L2 and R2 triggers are weirdly designed. These ones have no curve on the sides, so they don't really support the curve of your fingers. And last up is the fan noise. The fans get loud, so you're stuck choosing between a hot device and a loud device. And most of the time, you're gonna get both, unless you're running lower end emulation. Now, let's talk value. At $229 US, this is an upper mid-range Android handheld. The clamshell design is the highlight feature here because we don't have many other Android clamshell options. So that kind of puts the Flip 2 in its own unique category alongside the Flip 1. But looking at other handheld options, the only real competitor here is the Retroid Pocket 5. That device has the exact same internals and screen, but with a slimmer and much more curvy shape. One might even say slim thick. So it really comes down to your personal preference. You should ask yourself, would I spend more time gaming on a horizontal device or a clamshell? And knowing that this is a really thick clamshell and not too pocketable, would you still imagine using it as frequently? There's no right answer to that, and it'll absolutely change from person to person. I'm still deciding which one I personally prefer. The Retroid Pocket 5 has been my most used device for the last few months. I've been recording all of my gameplay on it and playing on it for fun too. It's a very lovely device. The Flip 2 has a lot of the same feelings in terms of performance and immersion. Games just feel big on here, but the blocky shape and strange ergonomics don't quite mesh with me personally as much as I was expecting. Objectively, this chipset fucks. The Snapdragon 865 chipset rips through Gamecube and PS2 at 2 to 3 times resolution. A surprising amount of Switch games and even some Windows games with a bit of tweaking. I'll leave a link to Ryan Retro's game compatibility sheet in the description below. It's a great resource to see what games can run on the Retroid Pocket 5 and the Flip 2. So we've learned that the Flip 2 isn't my one shining pearl, the end game handheld, the final frontier of retro gaming. The quest lives on to see another day. And you can join me in this quest by subscribing below. And while you're down there, let me know if you're looking to pick one of these up. And if you are looking to get one, what games would you play on it? I appreciate you, yes you, for sticking around. If you liked the video, go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you want to see more reviews like this, and also weekly retro game news. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Later! If you like this video, you should check out my review of the Retroid Pocket 5. This thing is probably the best retro handheld of 2024. It's an absolute beast. Same screen and chipset as the Retroid Pocket Flip 2. If you want to watch this review, you can check it out here.